thank you so much for joining. I think we can get started now. So to all who've joined us for the first time, karibu sana. And to those who are returning, thank you for returning again. Really enjoy having you in these sessions. So on screen with me, okay, depending on where your screen is oriented, is Macharia, Kinga. Yes, and he's going to be our guest for today. Now, before we get started, just a couple of things I'd like to get out of the way. In Macharia's session, you'll be expected to keep your video off and your microphone off. But our first session, which is what we're going into, is a networking session. So of course, that means that you have to at least switch on your audio. So I'll break you out into rooms. And when you're there, introduce yourself, share a little bit about what it is that you do for a living, and any other interesting tidbit that you would like to share, and then of course get to find out something about the other person as well. Yeah, so with that, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Beryl, and I'm the founder and MD of AngledNorth Limited, where we provide consulting solutions on career advancement and personal branding. So our solutions are designed specifically to help people either get a new job, get promoted, or expand their business. Now, this segment that we're in today is called After Hours, and it's a segment we run to just understand the career stories of leaders, their triumphs, their challenges, and lessons that we can get from their experiences. So let's get started. Oh, so excited. Can you tell? Now, today's guest is Macharia Kinga. Macharia is the country managing director at Camusat, and Camusat is a leading global provider of solutions in telecoms, ICT, energy infrastructure. So their clients are the Safaricoms, the Zukus, and many, many more. So under Macharia's leadership, the company has received multiple awards, including Best Contractor by Safaricom and loads others. He's also navigated the company through multiple changes, including industry shifts and much more. And he's only 40. So Macharia started his career in engineering. He's moved to business development, and now he leads a team of 400 people at Camusat, where they are focused, at Camusat. So Macharia's story is about stretching yourself and seeking uncomfortable growth opportunities. I think that will be very evident in his story. And he's also very passionate about catalyzing the growth of small businesses. And he has recently even spoken on a very inspiring initiative at UN Women and Safaricom. On the personal side, Macharia enjoys cooking, and he is really good with meats. So it comes as no surprise that his other dream career would have been hospitality. Yeah, and maybe he can give us tips for those of us who are not very good on grilling steak. Yeah. So in today's talk, he'll share how he built his career, about his work, about overcoming the imposter syndrome, and finding opportunities and challenges, and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Macharia Kinga. Hey, Macharia.
Thank you, Barry. Hi, thank you, Barry. Thank you for that warm reception, and also for the warm, encouraging words. Pleasure to be here. I think it's always interesting to speak about the journey, because you never know who you might inspire or who might be going. Your words could have an impact. So pleasure to be here.
Asante sana. Thank you very much. All right. So Macharia, let's get started. What was your first job ever? And how much were you being paid at that time? Oh, hello. Oh, can you guys hear me? Oh.
Hi, Barry. Sorry, we lost you.
Yes, I know. Sorry about that. Okay, so I was asking, what was your first job, and how much were you being paid in your first job?
Okay, so my first job was straight out of high school. My dad was very keen on me getting an idea of how the workplace is, and he didn't want me to just waste time as I waited to go into uni. So my first job was as a casual laborer to Chumi supermarket, and I think I was being paid 237 shillings per day.
Wow. And you worked how many days a week?
6 days a week, 8 hours a day.
What? All right. But then you were paid more than me. My first job, I was paid 3,000 shillings a month. I was a manager, by the way, for my first job. Somehow, I don't know, of 20 people.
I think you never forget your first job, though.
Actually, it was one of my favorite moments career-wise. I enjoyed it so much. Okay. And then what did you do next from there?
So from there, then I went back to college, did my telecommunication. Then, interestingly, I always had an interest in television. From a kid, even now, I love television. So I took the yellow pages, went under cable television, and was surprised as there was a cable television company in Kenya back then, a company called CTN. I called them up, I went in, and then they gave me my first internship. That became my first entry into telecommunication. And that was actually how I started off my career.
Yeah. Okay. What did you like about that job? Did you like that job?
First, the fact that it had the name television in it. I loved television. And it was actually cable television it was very new. Back then, no one was paying for TV. The only companies were DSTV. But then here it was a cable television network. And it was mainly in Westlands and Parklands. The good thing about the job is we spent a lot of time outdoors, and I really love the outdoors. So as a techie, we would spend 90% of time, fixing cable networks on power lines. So I love that bit. Yeah. It also included meeting new people because our job was to fix customer support, basically. So every single day you would meet new people and you'd get to interact. So those are the two things I loved about the job.
Which is interesting, most, or at least this is the picture we have, most people who love technical things tend not to like being with people. They tend to like just being with their machines and, those things. Yeah.
True.
Okay, and then where'd you go from there?
So I worked at cable television for around 3 years. Then eventually cable television was bought off by Wananchi. Then that was actually the birth of Zuku. So the Zuku network was being built. So that's actually how I ended up working at Zuku. Then again, but then when we started off working at Zuku, they needed to map out the city. There were no maps of the city, of the infrastructure, of the homes. So we spent a year basically canvassing the whole of Nairobi, mapping every single home, mapping every single power pole, every single power line. So again, in a whole year, I got to go around the city. And then this data was actually used then to design the first Zuku network. And that's how I actually ended up in Zuku.
All right. What do you like about it?
Again, I was very fortunate. The job included being outside. We basically was mapping out the city. So it meant just walking up on all the streets, getting details of homes, number of buildings. Again, I've always been fortunate. I think in school, I always really dreaded to get an office job. And I was very fortunate until recently to not have to work in an office. So most of my career, I'd say 70% of my career, I never really had a desk job. My job always included traveling, being outside the office. And yeah, so that was one of the things I loved about the job. The second thing was it was a new industry. Internet was just getting started, broadband was just getting started. I think before Zuku, there was really no internet at home. So we were at the cutting edge. There was a lot of learning to be done. I think we spent almost, I'd say in a year, 20% of the time was spent studying and learning about the new network. And for me, learning has always been one of those things that I like because I find it interesting to, it exposes you to new things. So that was very good. And then also, because Zuko was just starting, it was a startup, meaning everyone was doing everything.
Yeah.
So there was never really a dull moment. Actually, there was never, in the 5 years I was there was never really a dull moment. There was never a day that was similar to the next. So that was what was really interesting about the job.
Okay. What's the most memorable moment for you there?
Most memorable moment was now, as part of building the network, we had to get access into estates, into residential complexes, and we needed to provide internet to police units. So we had to go in and meet the police commissioner at that time, and it seemed like a daunting task. So we had to, make arrangements. Then eventually, when we met him, it was really an interesting. I mean, he basically just gave us a letter allowing us to roll out the network in all police housing units. So in one shot, we were able to get 10,000 homes connected from one interaction. So I think that was very, very memorable for me because it actually now brought in, I would say that's the time I started off into now my other part of the career, instead of now just doing the telco bit, the engineering bit, but also the relationship, the stakeholder management.
Yeah. And how did that opportunity come about? That's non-conventional.
So no, initially when we started off, we had a grand plan to connect 150,000 homes in Nairobi in the first year. But then immediately we realized that to do that, we needed to get access to homes, access to buildings, and that is something that had to be done. Now, we hadn't thought about it at the beginning, and there wasn't really a department charged with acquisition, as it was. So my then boss said, okay, let's do this. Let's just try it out. Find out which areas we can roll out. So my colleague said, what would be interesting is if we could get a whole bunch of homes in one shot. And who has a lot of homes? The government has a lot of homes. I said, okay, what do we do? So we walked to Integrity House. We asked, we need to speak to the person in charge. So they told, no, for this kind of, what you're asking, it has to be approved by the police commissioner. Okay, so can we see him? So a couple of weeks later, so that's how that started. So of that success, then actually a department was created for acquisition. And actually that became my first managerial role. So I went from being a technical engineer to now being an acquisition manager.
So that was your entry into business development now?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. What did you tell him? Because I'm just trying to imagine, this is a new company, total startup. You're telling me about a concept that I can't really relate to something I've seen in another company in the market, if it's a security issue, because it's police, I'm just thinking.
Yes.
Did he raise such questions? Like, how did you go about it?
Actually, did. So what we had done is we had really done quite a bit of homework. So we had a deck that showed similar networks in the US, similar networks in Europe, and how this was state of the art. And also, most importantly, how this was different from the existing infrastructure. So for example, we're going to provide fast internet to homes. And we were going to do it because it was a pilot project, we weren't going to charge anything for it. We're going to cover it. We were also going to make sure that all our staff were vetted, that they had certificate of good conduct. So we had really done quite a bit of homework. By the time we went to do the pitch, I think we'd spent close to a week just preparing the deck so that when we met him, we had addressed most of his concerns.
Had he raised them before, or you just tried to hypothesize what the concerns would be?
So basically, we tried to hypothesize. So we said, okay, what would be the main concern? The main concern would be security. The second concern would be who foots the bill. I mean, you can't, with government, you can't just walk in and tell them, okay, you're going to pay. And what happens in future? What happens in terms of maintenance? So we had thought about quite a bit of them. And then also now we had already mapped out. So I think the fact that we'd done quite a bit of groundwork served to convince him that, it was really a viable idea. And I gave him the extra confidence that he needed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think what I get from that is be bold. I mean, and you're going to go for any opportunity. Why are you picking the smallest one? Go for the biggest opportunity you can possibly find, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
and just do your homework. Like, get prepared with things, Okay, I like that. And then where'd you go from there?
So from there now we had a whole department, utilities department access. So I worked in utilities for a while. Then again, we needed now to expand the business, and we realized to expand the business, we had now to meet upcoming developers. So now we expanded the role to now, instead of just waiting for developments to be ready for us to go in, why don't we engage developers? So again, we got into that business. So we started off with meeting real estate developers, and then you meet the first one. Then you get like you said, you ask yourself, so who's the largest? I think for me, the whole point is this: if you're going to use an arrow to shoot out, you could either catch a hare or a deer. So it's the same effort, the same. So you just decide, pick up the biggest fish you can, and then because then the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward, and also actually then the same effort is usually more or less the same. So again, I transitioned to that, and then now moved into now a kind of like business development. Now preparing, thinking in advance of where the network could be, and being there before the homes are there. And so that was the role now that now started transitioning into business development. So because now it meant instead of waiting for the opportunities to arrive, we had to go in and create the opportunities.
All right, please mute. Thank you. Okay. And what's the most memorable thing you remember there?
I think there's so many memorable things. If I was to pick one, I would say the most memorable thing is we had to meet one developer, and he had already spent so much money in terms of putting fiber infrastructure into the building. And we had to come in and tell him that unfortunately we couldn't use the infrastructure that was there, and it had to come out. It was a new apartment complex in Kileleshwa, and he'd spent around 12 million. Now, to tell someone that he's just spent 12 million and it can't be used, that was really challenging because, I mean, no one wants to hear that they've just spent 12 million and it's not usable. But I mean, eventually we were able to convince him why we couldn't use the infrastructure that he had put in place. And actually off that conversation, what happened was now in the next, all the development he did, he would actually have us sit with the engineers to make sure that the specifications of what they were putting in was what would work for us. So I think that was memorable because one, it was a challenge that turned into an opportunity.
Yeah. Wow. I can imagine that meeting. What?
Yeah, it wasn't the easiest.
Yeah.
But I think again, for me, I think the most important thing is being authentic and having integrity. Because if someone I mean, bad news, sometimes you have to give up bad news, but people can always tell if you have an angle. But if you're authentic with it, I think it's easier, it's more palatable to hear bad news when you know that it's coming from a good place and there is no ulterior motive to it.
Absolutely. Okay. And so from there, where'd you go next?
So I worked for 5 years at Zuku. So from Zuku, I started off as a technical supervisor, moved to an acquisition manager. Then after 5 years, I moved into Camusat. Again, I started off in Camusat, as an acquisition manager. But at Camusat, we were working, the acquisition was different now because the projects we were working on were building telecommunication towers. Now, this was still acquisition, but a different kind of acquisition because you had to get in land, negotiate with the landowners. The leases have to be long leases, 10 years. So we started off with that particular business. Worked at acquisition for a year. Then after at Camusat, we did quite a bit of around, I think in that time we did 100 towers. Then we got into fiber rollout. So we started doing fiber rollout for Zuku again. Now, as we did fiber rollout, the customer came back to us and said, okay, what if when you're building the network, you could also do some sales? And again, now we had to do sales. So, like I said, I always jump in if there's a new opportunity. So we jumped into sales. And now from acquisition, I added sales into the portfolio. We had sales agents, we had like 10 sales agents. So that's how now I went now again from engineering to acquisition to sales and marketing. And so that became a new role at Camusat. So I did that role for a year. Then we realized we needed to increase business. And to increase business, we had to go out there, find business. So again, my boss came to me and said, okay, what can you do about it? Are you able to do business development? At that point, I didn't know what business development meant. So I went to Google, Googled it, what is required, and said, okay, we'll try it out. So for the next year, we just spent doing proposals, filling tenders. And I think that was in 2015. We did proposals, none. We didn't get even one. I think we must have done close to 90. We were doing an average of 3 to 4 proposals a month. So 2015, we didn't have anything. In 2016, we had our first break. So we got a small tender to do cable installations for ASK. So it was small compared to the business we were doing. Our other business, our revenue was to the tune of $1 billion a year. And here we had a business that was 6 million. But that was really, really good because it was the first time we did a proposal and we got success. And I think here is the first lesson is to celebrate the small successes because you build up on those. And I think out of that one success, then it was basically a validation that of the years, the 1 year we'd spent wasn't all in vain. And I think what we didn't know then was that the year we spent trying to get business, basically we spent a year marketing ourselves. So it wasn't a year wasted.
Yeah. Because now people are like, oh, who are these people?
Exactly. So people were like, okay, before that, no one knew about Camusat. All our business was referral. But after the year, because we would go into tendering opening, we do proposals in offices, soon people started hearing the name. And it's because of this that in 2016, we got our first major project as a result of this. So we got our first major project. And from there, I think it was our inflection point because it's at that point that now we went into Safaricom, we later on got into Airtel, got into Liquid. So our business really, really grew from that point.
How did you keep going? You know, when you go for a whole year without hearing that you've won any business, it can be very, what's the word, disheartening.
Tenacity. I think it's for anyone to succeed, that's a quality that you have to have.
Yeah.
You have to keep going at it. You fall, you fail, you have to keep going at it. I always say you only stop when you've achieved what it is that you wanted to do. Until you've achieved it, then you don't stop. So you have to keep believing that your efforts will bear fruit because eventually they do. I think there's a Chinese saying that says, "No man wakes up at dawn that is not able to feed his family." Because you keep doing it continuously, because with each step you gain some knowledge. Every time you're not really starting from zero. You had a bit of experience, you failed the first time, you learn, you tweak your proposals, you pick yourself up. And also the most important thing is in the 1 year, we kept asking for feedback. So anytime we were not successful, we'll go back to our clients and say, okay, so what was it that made us not successful? And they would, the good thing about Kenyans I find is very honest in terms of feedback. So people will tell you, no, either you were too expensive, your product was not what we wanted, we felt that you weren't well prepared, which is not a good thing to hear, but it's good feedback nonetheless. Then you take all this feedback and you use it to grow. I think that's the other thing is to always be willing to learn. Because if you're not willing to learn, then I think I always say the most detrimental quality anyone or a leader can have is pride, because it will keep you from learning. So if you go to a customer and the customer tells you your pitch wasn't well thought out, you can either do two things. You can take it personally and, say they're just a bad customer, or you can go back and reflect and rethink about your pitch and see what did you not do well. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. And then from there, where'd you go?
So from there, we did business development, and now as we landed one of our biggest projects. So and the project was to roll out, actually it was 3,000 homes in a month. So because I had still done engineering, then I went back to operations. So we had this pilot project that had to work. So we'd gotten the quote unquote the big fish. Now we had to skin it. So we had this big project. So I went back into now operations. And at that point now, I was now moved from now being business development manager to now construction manager. So I again went back, not really to square one, but to back to basics, what I was doing before. So then I worked as a construction manager for the first project. The project was a success. As a result, we actually got into Safaricom. And now when we got into Safaricom, we needed a project manager to run the project. So then I became the project manager for that particular project. Then we ran with the project from 2017 to 2018. The portfolio grew and we had now to have more project managers. So now there became a need to have someone lead the project managers. So then the role of the chief technical officer was introduced, and I took up the role of chief technical officer.
Was that daunting?
It was. I think the biggest challenge was this role required me to manage people who are peers, who are colleagues. So people who had been in the same industry for the last 10 years, we'd grown together. So getting the first, I think, and this is actually where the imposter syndrome comes in. You ask yourself, what qualifies me to lead this new group? And these were my colleagues as of yesterday. Let's even use that word. So that was a bit daunting because it was a bit challenging. And also the fact that I was working for an international company. And I remember having this conversation with my then boss. I actually called him aside when he said, okay, you're going to be chief technical officer. And I told him, you do realize that some of our project managers are white and they are expatriates. And like, yeah, and like, okay, so you think they will agree to listen to me? He said, no, they'll have to, they will. So he called everyone in a meeting and said, okay, so Macharia is our new chief technical officer. Anyone with a problem with that? And surprisingly, they weren't. So I think some of the challenges we have, some of them are basically in our minds. And I think it's important to speak them out, because had I not spoken to my boss, I would have spent the whole time working on eggshells, worrying if that the expatriates would listen to me, and it would really have hampered our production.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Very interesting trajectory there. What's the most memorable thing for you when you look back at that time?
Most memorable thing for me is, I think it's improving on the efficiency. I think it's the support I got from the team. I didn't expect it. I thought there was going to be a bit of challenge, but the support was tremendous. I think the team basically put 110%. We worked at night. There's one incident where we were lighting up a network in Westlands, and the client had insisted, okay, for us to get to know the network works, you must have at least one customer connected. So the network was completed at 10 p.m. Now we had to find someone who would agree for us to go to the home at midnight and do a test run. And we were just outside Westlands, outside Second Parklands. And then these old Asian man walks by and he's like, what are you guys doing? He's like, we're installing fiber. He's like, oh, that's interesting. Would you want to, well, how can I get connected? He said, you can get connected just now. What do you mean now? Said, yeah, we can connect you right now. So we were able to connect him at midnight. And just like that, I think it was really interesting because it was a culmination of a lot of effort. and to see the first customer connected on the fiber network and for it to work. And this was something that we'd been working on for months. So I think that is one of those memorable moments.
Yeah. Also, your clients are very demanding in
Yes,
your industry, yeah?
yes. Fiber is a very emotive industry because fiber delivers service into individual homes. Now, unlike any other products where people are intimately acquainted with the product. So when you connect someone with fiber to their home, they expect that it works and it works well. And some of our customers are, have really a brand names of Safaricom, Airtel. They're big companies, so people expect nothing but the best from them. So for you, you have to deliver, and I think it's one of those things in the industry that is a bit demanding. But then the rewards also are because you can see the good thing about it is you can see the satisfaction of the end user.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So just as a reminder, please put in your questions in the chat. You can also send them privately if you prefer. All right. Okay. And then from there, where'd you go?
So I worked as a chief technical officer for Camusat for 2 years. Then I got a job offer to head a department, a company called Adrian. So I remember the owner of the company approached me, and again, this is where I said one of the challenges I've had to overcome is imposter syndrome. And we had a conversation, and he said, "Okay, I want you to come in and join my organization." And I told him, "Okay, are you sure? Are you sure?" Yeah, sure. So because I was going into head a much bigger team, I was going to a team that I did not handpick or a team that I wasn't intimately acquainted with. But again, I took a leap of faith, took the new role, I was head of department for close to a year. Then my former employer came calling and said they had a position open for country managing director. And that's how I went back to Camusat.
And there you have been.
And that's where I've been, yes.
All right. So what's the rationale that you have for these career moves?
Yeah. The rationale, I think it's the passion. I'd like to say I'm the fortunate few who get to do what they love. So I've always, from my first job at CTN, I've always been passionate about telecommunication. So it's an industry I'm really passionate about. So even when the job is very difficult, since it's something I'm passionate about, I'm able to keep going on. And as a result, the success builds up on that. Then I think, I'd say it's the passion for the job. And also I've been really fortunate to have extremely good bosses and very dedicated teams. And I think also in the journey also, I've been able to have very strong mentors throughout the process. And I think that is something that I always urge even my team now to always get a mentor, because a mentor is someone who's already gone through the journey you're about to undertake. Yeah. And they might have invaluable input that would help you, navigate the pitfalls, navigate the challenges. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what was the role of sponsors for you in your specific moves?
Sponsors, I'd say, I'd say it's big. Actually, I think that's the other thing. It's especially with career moves. I watched this TED talk. I can't remember the lady's name, but the point was it's always good to have someone who will speak for you in a meeting where you are not. And so for sponsors, what you need is one, but you need to deliver. For someone to be able to be willing to put their name out there and back you, you need to also give them the assurance that they're backing the right horse, that when they speak about you, that they can confidently say, so-and-so will perform and you will not let them down. So it's a two-way, it's actually a two-way thing. As much as you want to have someone who sponsors along your career, you also have to have a proven track record, and also be tenacious, so that you're not going, for example, someone is not going to recommend you for a position only for you to quit when the going gets tough. So that's one of the key things I've come to appreciate throughout my career.
Absolutely. Oh, you're really, really talented, but you just don't listen. Could care less. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So what's a humbling experience you've had in your career?
Ooh, humbling experience. I've had quite a few.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, okay, I'd say the most humbling experience was in some of the spectacular failures. I think in all careers, you have some failures that knock the wind out of you. And I've had some of those. And I think the one that stands out the most is one project that we did. And I think in the spirit of trying to get everything done and trying to do everything, I overlooked the input from my team. And as a result, we ended up overshooting on the budget, and we ended up delaying the project. And it was very humbling because it's at that point I realized that you really do need input from everyone. The role of leadership is not really to provide all the answers. The role of leadership is to, I think from my say, the role of leadership is to remove all the obstacles. And to let I think Steve Jobs said it best, is to, when you hire the smart people, it's to let them, not tell them what to do, but let them do what you hired them for. So that was one of the, I would say. But then again, with all failures, it's a failure is wasted if you don't learn from it. Someone once said you should never let a good crisis go to waste. So I think that I carry that, because every time I'm in a crisis, I ask myself, okay, the crisis will pass, but what lesson will I learn from this crisis?
Yeah. It's an interesting attitude. Okay. How about memorable challenges you faced? Yeah, and I think two specific ones for many of us on this call, because many people here are themselves leaders, is managing people and leading the organization. Yeah, so what two challenges come up there? And then how did you navigate through it?
Okay, I think on managing people is when I moved into Iden, I met a new team. And especially when you meet a new team, there's definitely going to be a period of time, because you have to prove to the team why they should listen to you and why you. I think that was really challenging, because part of the team that I met, of my direct report, had actually interviewed for the job I got. So, and this is where it required a bit of, I think, humility, because you need also to see people for who they are, people themselves. As much as you're in a leadership role, you need also to empathize with the situation you find your team in. And so let me give an example. So no one wants to apply for a job and not get it. So if you do end up leading a team and one of your team members had applied for this job, empathy helps you to understand where they're coming from, so that you don't see any resistance as personal. It's human nature. And if you're able to empathize, and the teams will always see, your team can tell where you're coming from and how you treat, for lack of a better word, those who are perceived as your adversaries, because that tells your team what to expect from you. Yeah. I like there's a TED talk by Peter Anderson, and he says the two main managers' role is, one, to know that it is not about you. If you as a manager remember that part, that it's never about you, it's about the team that you lead. Your role there is to facilitate, to encourage, to grow, to coach. Then you manage, your level of management becomes much easier. And the second rule is, it's all about you. Your team will take cues from you. Yeah. So in organizations, you can always tell what kind of leader an organization has by the people you meet. Sometimes you don't need to meet the CEO, the MD, or the managers. If you interact with the team, it will tell you. If you find a very timid team, it tells you what kind of management they are undergoing. So if you learn these two things, that it's not really about you, that your job as a leader or a manager is to help and enable your team, is to be the ambassador. Like if you're a managing director or a CEO, you're going to have to represent your team to the board, to the shareholders. And your shareholders and the board will take cues from you. So you are, in all essence, their ambassador. So your job is to present them well. Your job is to make sure that you give them the tools they need. And I think your job is to take the heavy punches. Basically, that's why that's your role. Your role is not to, your role is to take the big punches so that you can basically let your team absorb, if you can, a lot of the heat, so that the team can now function. So in management, I think that's one of the things. It's always to, at the end of it, remember that your team are human beings, are just like you. They have emotions just like you. They have concerns just like you. And when you do this, then you have empathy, and then it becomes easy because you can put yourself in their shoes.
Awesome. Speaking of which, let's go back to that imposter syndrome that you spoke about. Yeah. So there's this book. I don't know, I'm going to date myself here, but it was our set book. It was in one of our set books when I was in high school. And it was a short story called The Case of the Prison Monger. Yeah. That is my favorite short story of all time. Of all time. So it's a very ironical story. I think I like it because it's ironical and it has a lot of idiosyncrasies in there. It keeps it interesting. So the story is about a guy who is in court and he is pleading with the judge to go back to prison. But the prosecutor is saying the biggest punishment would be to free him. And his defense lawyer is also insisting, no, my client is guilty, take him to jail, And so the reason is because this guy has realized that prison is actually where he'll be able to get free food, a free roof over his head, and he'll be able to get a great career because he's studying to be a lawyer for free in prison. Meanwhile, outside in the free world, other people are barely making it. I mean, the country is going through turmoil and all those types of things. Yeah, that's the context of the story. So in the story, my favorite line is when he says, "Great expectations make frustrated men." Yeah, and then he goes on to explain that actually our parents taught us not to want too much. They taught us to, get by with the little that we have. Yeah. So now, in the context of that story, I think a very big thing that people suffer with is like they have this, we get into our heads about things. Let me not say we get into our heads about things, and then it's like we just can't see outside of that thing. So for us, we've created a prison. Yeah, and also the author says at the end, like who's really in prison? Is it the people outside the prison or the people in the prison? Yeah. So I feel like sometimes we have this prison we've created in our career where we feel like, as long as I'm getting by, as long as things are just, I get a salary, blah blah blah, whatever, I stay in this point. But then there are the other people who say, but this may be looking like an uncomfortable situation, and I could actually thrive here. Yeah, I could actually thrive here. Where am I going with this? So some of these things, let's talk about imposter syndrome. Yeah, like what's this thing that's holding people back, in your opinion? What are some of these things that are playing in our heads that aren't true, and we've created for ourselves this prison that we're living in, that we can't get out of? I can only do this, I can only be this. Yeah,
I think I'd say it's how we perceive failure. It becomes easier to avoid failing because then mentally we've stigmatized failure. And also I think it's the narrative that is out there. We tend to hear of success stories. A lot of people speak about their success stories, and so it looks all smooth. But most of the people would tell you that they've really had to have some failures before they got success. A good example is Thomas Edison. On his 1,000, 1,000 inventions didn't work until he got the light bulb. Elon Musk, three rockets. The fourth one, he would have gone bankrupt. Steve Jobs was fired from his own company. So if you think about it, I think that's the thing. It's the stigma that is attached to failure. So it becomes easier to not really want to try, because if you fail, then, but it's all, I think it's all in the mind, because we expect ourselves to succeed every single time, which is impossible. It's truly impossible to, mathematically, it's not possible that every single attempt you will do, you'll be able to succeed. So I think that fear of failure is one of the things that we are, maybe as a society, we're not taught to embrace and to, so we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. So most people decide it's better not to try than to try and fail.
Yeah. So some of the things I have seen, people just kill their careers, so early. Maybe you just start defining yourself based on your, like, let's say I'm an engineer, I did engineering. You can't see yourself out of that. There's a desire, there could be more, but you just like, no, I have to stay with what's safe to me. I have known myself as an engineer. I've seen self-sabotage, people will say things like, I don't belong in those circles, I just don't feel comfortable. But an interesting one for me is people say, I don't have the qualifications for that. I don't have the papers, rather. I don't have the papers for that. What would you tell someone like that? The reason I'm not going to apply is because I don't have the papers, Macharia.
Actually, to be very honest, a lot of times it's not even the papers. If I've been fortunate enough for a period of my career to interact with people from other continents, and you realize at the end of the day, it's not the papers. It's what they can deliver. I think the first guys who invested in the company I was working with were Americans, and the can-do attitude. You would find a guy, he has zero experience, but he's willing to try it out, because unless you try it, you won't know whether you can do it. And sometimes you will never be 100% prepared for every challenge you have. Ever. I think I like what Jeff Bezos says, you only need 70%. If you only know 70%, that's enough for you. So you will never, for all the life challenges, for all your role requires, you will never have 100%. When I took my current job as a country managing director and I did the first interview, for me, I didn't have any experience in finance, but it was a requirement. But then again, you feel, okay, it's going to be a challenge. Maybe I'm not ready for this role, but you have to challenge yourself. You have to challenge yourself and tell yourself, okay, I have this new role. How much of it am I able to do? If I'm able to do 60%, the 40% I can learn on the job. And usually that's how it actually works. In real life, no one is ever prepared for everything that they will ever encounter. You look at all the people who invented anything, especially like inventors. You're inventing something that doesn't exist. So you can't actually be prepared for the outcome. You just have to go in and say, okay, this is what I know I can do. So first start off from your first point. This is what I need to build up on. And I think what can help and what has helped me, especially in terms of the imposter syndrome, is accepting the parts that you don't have. And once you accept that, that means you are able now to have a plan on working to meet those particular steps. So for example, for myself, I got a business coach who is excellent in the finance part of, so that becomes, so you're not going in blind and you're not being naively expecting that everything is going to be rosy, but you're going in prepared. But I think I don't think for my career growth, I don't think there's any time I got into a role that I could say I was 100% prepared and it's going to be smooth sailing, and it's never smooth sailing. But as soon if you accept in your mind that it will not be smooth sailing, so even when you get the challenges, you're not surprised by them, and they don't hold you back, and it helps you to prepare to overcome these challenges.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. And I like the quote that ends that story is, we live in a world of relative freedom and relative bondage. So you could think you're free, but actually you're living in, it's okay. Let me speak about careers, right? So we are in a career, you're in your career, particular job, and it's safe, but you feel you're stuck inside there because you don't want to move out. You're living in fear. So are you really free? And like the person who's out there and you're like, oh, I'll try something new. I'll be the first one to raise up my hand. That one is really the one who's free. Even though to you, you're like, you're risking it all, you'll fail, and all that stuff. And so I think it's a great challenge. Yeah, I think that's a great challenge. So speaking about, that sort of thing, I find that also people who are very technical, come from a technical background, engineering or whatever, those things, areas around that, really sometimes really struggle with transitioning, from technical expert to leader. Yeah. So how would you advise someone if they're thinking about making that next step? How would they go about it?
Okay, now I think first is to appreciate how business works. I think most engineers don't want to hear, and actually engineers are very averse to talks about money, cost, how much is going. So engineers are all about, I want to prepare the greatest product. But the only great product is one that can be bought, that has a customer. So once you get I think my business coach uses the word that once you have the appreciation for money, you appreciate that everything has a cost, and everything has the end product is only worth it if it's able to satisfy a need and someone is willing to pay for that need. So it's to move out from, I would suggest is to move out from thinking about the product itself and to think about the end user and why are you doing it? Because you could have the best engineer, best product, you could have the best software, you could have the most innovative vehicle, but if no one uses it, then it doesn't fulfill its purpose. Yeah. So I think first is to first have that, understand, have an appreciation for business, understand why businesses exist. I think most people find, or most engineers find the discussion about money to be restrictive or but the whole point of this is, of any business, it's for it to be able to meet its shareholders and to satisfy its customers. So when you start off from that particular point, then now, and usually that's usually what limits, especially technical, because as much as yes, you might be a technical expert, you also need to have a commercial background to understand the commercials of the business, because shareholders respond to the commercials. Your customers will respond to the cost. So you have to have an appreciation of that. And I think it's not very, very difficult. And you really don't have to undergo, formal training. There's quite a bit of literature out there. There's quite a bit of TED Talks. If you move now from the production point to looking at it from how does this product, what does it take to get this product in the hands of the end user, then now you start appreciating. And when you transition from that, because that's actually where growth comes, because now I would say speak for myself, the reason my career has grown is the minute I started off with business development, you started having a different idea of what is required. You are able now to look outside your organization, you're able to look outside your field and get feedback from the market, what it is required. It requires. And when you take these two things and combine them, then you become a valuable asset in your organization, because one, you understand production and what goes into the product, but also most importantly, you understand what it takes to make that product or that service affordable to customers.
Absolutely. So embedding yourself in other areas of the business, there's no way out. Yeah,
True.
you have to know what's going on. Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah. Because you have to empathize, right? It's also part of it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the time I spent, actually, I think the time I spent doing sales,
Yeah.
because once you're out there and you're with salespeople and they're trying to make a sale, then you start understanding, empathizing with them, how much it takes to just land a sale. So then it gives you the motivation to now work on your cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so for you, when you're hiring, what's the most important criteria? You're hiring a leader. Mindset. Okay.
Mindset.
Not that they have an MBA.
Mindset. You can train for other skills, you can train for tools, but the right mindset is everything. Without the right mindset, even the most educated, most trained will not be able to deliver. So the mindset, and then that is basically it. For me, I'd say even someone might not have the experience, but they have the right mindset, which means they're willing to learn, they're willing to put in the time, they're willing to grow. Then that is a far more better quality than someone who has experience and the papers to back it.
Yeah. Okay. But that's practically speaking, because we also want to know how we can navigate career changes. Can you think of someone you've had, not the most technically astute person in whatever area they were coming to work in, maybe had no industry experience? What is it that convinced you in the interview, looking back, what is it that convinced you this is the right candidate?
I think in the interview, it was they were very willing to learn. They were very honest about it. They were very honest that they're going to do a role that they have not done before, but they were willing to, they're very genuine about it and honest about their limitations. And they were willing to learn. And what they did not just see obstacles. So for example, in this particular case, they did not have the experience, nor did they have the technical skills, but they didn't see that as an obstacle. They saw that as an opportunity for them to learn something new. So that was where the difference was.
Okay. So they didn't, and they also didn't, I'm guessing, they didn't have the 100% plan either.
No, not at all. I mean, in fact, it was a completely different field. I mean, they were coming in from sales and they're going into technical, completely, like day and night. But they said, okay, I actually believe I can do this. And with time, I can do this. And they were willing to put in the work. I think that's also the other most important thing. They were willing to put in the work to gain the skills they needed to fit in the role.
Yeah. And I say that because I think there's also this misconception that, we can cover a multitude of sins with an MBA, or that we need to have this concrete business plan literally by the time we are applying for a certain job. No, and it's not true. That's another prison in your mind moment. Yeah, okay.
Very true.
Right. And tell me about yourself. Would you describe yourself as an introvert or an extrovert or something in between?
I didn't say describe myself as an extrovert. I think I enjoy meeting new people, and actually that's one of the reasons why like business development was a really good opportunity for me. So yeah, I'd say an extrovert.
Okay, so now speak to us introverts. How do you get comfortable doing stuff like this? Speaking to people you have never met, addressing people about things that, how do you do it?
I'd say it's you have to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, get practice. For me, actually, to be very honest, I was very, very shy as a child. I was very, very shy. I was a very shy child. But then my mom decided, okay, we're going to get you into debate club. So she enrolled me in debate club. So you went from being the kid in the class that didn't want to speak to now you have to do debate. And I'm grateful for her for that, because out of that, I think one of the most important skills anyone can have is the ability to communicate.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of exemplary candidates not get opportunities because they were not able to communicate. They were not able to articulate. They went in and kept quiet. I've referred some really brilliant people, and I've said glorious CVs to them and said, okay, you need to hire this guy. He's very good. She's very good at what she does. Then they go to an interview, and then the person says, I thought you said so and so was very good at what they did. They came here, and that is usually the biggest challenge. One of my friends, my friend is actually further to my friend, and is a professor. Said, what if he was to go back to school? The one thing he wish he had spent more time in is learning to communicate. I mean, that skill is
everything.
So it's everything. It's everything. Unfortunately, the business world moves so fast. There isn't a lot of time. You only have that one shot. So for introverts, I'd say practice. And I know it sounds silly, but practice on the mirror. Have that conversation. Say it out.
Yeah.
If you're going to for an interview, practice it. Do the pitch. Listen to yourself. Get comfortable with the sound of your own voice, because the more prepared you are, the easier it becomes.
Yeah.
Then even for networking, I think one of the things I read quite early on was on how to always find something that someone is interested in. It's human nature for us to like to talk about ourselves. So if you're an introvert and you meet someone, give them opportunity to talk about themselves, ask leading questions. So I think you have to do it. It doesn't come in naturally. Okay, for some people, yes. Some people are naturally extroverts, so they'll thrive in a situation. But for those who are not extroverts, I'd say go in prepared. Even if it's an informal, for example, you're going in for a cocktail party, a company cocktail party, prepare. What will I say? So because the more comfortable you are, the more prepared you are, the more easier it is for you to be able to communicate and not get too shy and clam up.
Yeah. And I think just remember, whatever it is you're thinking, they're thinking about you, they're not thinking it. They're really not. People are really just thinking about themselves. I know we think, sometimes it's this thing where you think, oh my gosh, they're thinking about everything that's coming out of my mouth. They're not. They're not thinking about every single thing. Yeah.
Actually, they're thinking about making a good impression on themselves.
Exactly. They're also thinking about the same problem you have, so I just get comfortable with it. And I also just like that point. It's just thinking, what value can I offer? It also gets you out of that mind space of I need to be impressive, because that's not the point. It's that you're supposed to be of value to this person, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm a proponent of public speaking classes, if you can get them, especially for people, if you find yourself, because this happens, some people who actually have shortness of breath, when you tell them, okay, there's an interview in the panel of 5, and they say, I can't breathe. And this brilliant person, it can be so sad. This brilliant person misses the opportunity. Yeah. And someone else who's just able to compose themselves and articulate their value with less than half the qualifications, less than half the experience, will get through. Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. Awesome. So tell me about, I know you've been doing some really amazing work with mentoring women and women-owned businesses. So tell us about that and why it's important to you.
Oh, okay. Now that's around 2017 we started off doing some projects in Kakamega, and part of the project involved trenching and putting fiber underground. So we met this amazing woman. She had her in the area. She said, okay, do you guys have like 10 minutes? I just need 10 minutes for a pitch. So her name is Phoebe. She runs a company called Agro and Drill. So I remember we were actually on the road. So we met at Kakamega at a gas station. So we just parked the car, we bought a soda. She said, okay, there's this, I see you guys doing this project. I do water projects. They're not very different from fiber projects. And I'd be willing to try. Are you guys willing to help? So we decided, okay, why not? So now the approach we used was slightly different. We always say we don't want to set up anyone for failure. So we told, okay, we'll give you a project. We started off with a 0.5 kilometer stretch of infrastructure to put in. And then we talked to one of our supervisors and told, okay, we have this woman-owned business. She's coming on board. and she hasn't done this business before. So we wanted to take her through the process. So we started off. So it started off as a pilot project with one female-owned business, ended up being to actually, as of last year, 70% of contractors were businesses owned by women, either 100% owned or 50% owned by women. So when we started off, it was just basically, I would say we wanted to try it out, and also we wanted to change the narrative. And the narrative was that there was this kind of work that is, male dominated, and because the work involved actually dealing with casuals, and casuals, you're talking about 100 plus, men who are trenching, and there was this misconception that you needed to have it was a very masculine kind of role. So we started off with the first business that grew and real. So she worked with us for a couple of projects, went on from doing half a kilometer projects to doing 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers. Then around 2018, Safaricom started, I would say, an initiative called Women in Business. And they wanted to encourage more women in tech. Yeah. So they came to us and asked us whether we would be willing to onboard some more women. And because we'd had a good experience with the first project and something we were already doing, so we onboarded 4 women-owned businesses. For us, the plan was the same. So first is to build capacity. I think the thing we did differently was to help the women build capacity and train. So we embedded our teams with them. And when they started off, we started off with 1 or 2 teams. And as of actually now, out of the 7 women we had, 3 of them now are working direct. Actually, 4 of them are working directly with Safaricom. So it's a project that I've seen grow, and it's something that I'm very proud of, because we gave opportunities and we changed. And as a result of that, this year we were invited to speak to at the UN Women webinar for responsive procurement. And like I said, I think it's a step by step that started very modestly. But like I said, we've also reaped benefits from that, because we've been able to see companies grow. We've been able to provide opportunities for women, and especially also provide opportunities for employment in general. Yeah.
And why are you passionate about it?
I'm very passionate about it because I have 2 lovely sisters. I'm in between 2 girls, and growing up, I think the thing that I know for sure. I mean, like my sisters I think my sisters are smarter than I am, and that does not translate in the work environment. So there's always this disconnect. I always ask people, when you see like a graduation ceremony, you hear the names, and the names are a whole spectrum. You hear the men and women graduating. But then my question was, what happens to women engineers when they graduate? So because I'd one of the background I had, and that how I'd seen my sisters grow and have very strong role. I think my mom is a very strong woman. My sisters are also very ambitious. But now, when I went into the workplace, there was a disconnect. So I kept wondering what happened in class. In the class I was in engineering class, we had 5 lady engineers.
Out of how many?
We had 5 lady engineers out of 12. Class of 12. Wow. So, but then fast forward, and then you try and find out what happened. Then you find the opportunities. I don't want to say it's systemic, but I just want to say someone had to take. It has to be a deliberate attempt to level the playing field. So, and what we did as Camusat was to deliberately say, okay, we are going to go out there and encourage women in tech, and we're going to make sure that we help them build capacity, and also we're going to not really lower, but you're going to make it easy for them to enter into the business. Because, for example, if you come in and say, we will only give work to subcontractors who have 5 years experience, you've not really said you don't want women-owned businesses, but basically that's what you've said, because they don't have, where will they get the 5 years experience? So, and you can easily go in and say, oh, we've tried, it was very open. We had that open tender. The tender was open to everyone. But in that tender, you built in a condition that locked out a group of the population. So what we did was to say, okay, we will knock off this part. And then the other thing also is, okay, again, you don't want to just to give opportunities and set up people for failure, just to say you did, because that's something I've also seen, that people go in and say, okay, we will just hire female engineers to give them the opportunities. And at the very instance of a small slight problem, we can go back and say, oh, we tried and it didn't work out.
Glass ceiling.
Yes, we tried it. Because I remember very early on in my career, I had an experience that stayed with me. So we had one female engineer, but then she wasn't able to continue the work and she quit. But then that one lady was quoted years to come. That, we tried. Oh, we tried women engineers and it didn't work.
Yes.
So that's the reason why something had to be done, and we wanted to make it, deliberate. And I can say it has worked because in 2019, 2020, we did 2020, we did one of the most difficult projects we've done as a company, and that was doing a fiber network from Eldoret all the way to Turkana. I mean, that is the harshest climate-wise, security-wise. Everything about that project was difficult. But this project was done from conception to finish with female project managers. So we were able to shatter that myth of, Turkana is a very risky place. You only have women can't work in Turkana, or the community there does not respect women. You can't have. So by doing so, we've been able to change the mindset, mostly importantly, and also maybe shatter some of these myths that are unfounded.
Yeah. And I think also it's helping people in the organization to become more empathetic to each other. Going back to that empathy thing, that's people ask, I think the big byword right now is have emotional intelligence. I actually disagree. It's have empathy. Have empathy. It will make things a lot more easy for you. Okay. Wow. So that what you're talking about, that whole glass ceiling thing, is very so the for those who may not know, but the glass ceiling is this management theory that has been proven apparently, that when people get this, so you're a woman, you're a woman and you're pulled into this position, but when people are putting you into this position, it's because it's failed or near failure. Everyone else who's male apparently has tried and not gone through, and so now they're calling in the woman, but they know it will probably fail, so they're using it as an opportunity to then say, you see, now we gave the women that opportunity. What are we to do now? What are we to do? So glass ceiling. Do you think that glass ceiling is 100% the problem? Or that sometimes, especially looking back at working with these women, or is it sometimes some of these things are just in our heads? We are the ones who've told ourselves some of these things.
No, actually, it is a problem. And I'll say that of experience. The journey to have women-owned businesses, you can hear it. I remember in one instance, one customer told me, I hope these women you're bringing to my project will not be the reason why it doesn't work. So it is a real thing. It is conversations I've had. And unfortunately, that's the reality of it. You would want to say it's a like it's just a perception, but it's not. Personally, I have experienced it. I've had, people have come to me and said, okay, it's a noble idea, but be careful, you really, it's for someone to get to a point where they're able to enunciate it and say it and tell you to your face, it means, and these are people who sit in places where they make decisions. If they're able to say it to you and they sit in places that are able to make decisions, it means it's already a bias they have. So whether some people will not say it, some people will not, and like no one ever wants to be called out. So, and we'll always point to something. I always say this: you never hear the phrase, "You know what? We're no longer hiring a a male CFO because John was a bad CFO. You never hear that phrase.
Never
You
had
never
it.
hear a guy saying, yo, Mark came here and he didn't perform. So from now on, no more men in
Under the age
finance, no
of
more men
30.
in project. Yeah, exactly. But so that tells you. So, but I think it's something that bit by bit, it has to be a deliberate attempt to change. It won't happen on its own. And one of the things that for us, what we did was even the women we onboarded, we challenged them that we don't want now just to create a token, token women in business. So it's a business owned, a female owned business, but at the top of the pyramid, but the whole pyramid is male. Like, okay, so we're giving you this opportunity, but also you have to prove to us that you're also empowering women down the line. That when you come to your site, you're going to find 2 or 3 or 4 female engineers.
I like that. Yeah. So don't self-perpetuate. Don't perpetuate the same thing, the same narrative that's helping the glass ceiling effect. Yeah. All right. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. So you ready for Q&As?
Sure.
Oh, great. Okay. Let me see there's some chat. So Lindsay says, wow, your story is inspiring. What resonated with me is the 2015 project that took a whole year of proposals to get your first contract. Amazing tenacity there. For real. Yeah. So Winston Churchill, he's the one who said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Oh, thank you, Mubi. And Abigail asks, how and where do you find inspiration? Oh, this is a good one. Macharia, this is a good one. Let me add something. Inspiration versus motivation. Okay, now you can answer.
Where do I find inspiration? I think it's, I would say it's the background. I think especially my mom, I think she's very tenacious, very tenacious. And as a result, I think when you grow up in that environment where failure is, how do you say, you don't let failure define you. You have to keep, even when you don't succeed. And then also, you need also to know why you're doing what you're doing. So if, for example, you're only doing something for money, usually soon it gets tiring, or it does not, how do I say, it's not a really worthwhile goal to put in. So for me, for example, now I've worked for multinational companies, and I always think about it this way. I will, for the organization I work with, it will be judged either before, when my career was my age, I would say, like, I was a young engineer. So in that organization, my actions would reflect, they say, oh, we can't promote very early because young engineers tend not to do. Later on, when I asked for multinational, said, okay, we're trying out, actually, we're trying out the first, local MD. So you have to see that your actions also reflect backwards. So when you know that what you do can reflect either positively or negatively, that gives you the motivation to keep fighting even when the situation gets difficult.
Okay.
And then also, as a leader, you have to yes.
No, go ahead.
I think also, as a leader, you have to remember that in any organization you're leading, you have people who depend on livelihood, basically. I mean, you have people whose jobs depend on your decisions. So if you were to give up, you honestly, I think when for those of us who are lucky enough to be in leadership positions, we need to remember that thing. It's not about us. It's about the whole, everyone, your whole team, because you cannot afford to give up. If you give up, you're not giving up as an individual, you're giving up everyone. So when you go to the board and you give up, or your shareholders, basically you seal the fate of the 100+ people who are depending on those jobs. And I always ask myself, can you look someone in the eye and tell them, the reason you're going home, the reason you're losing your job is, like, it got difficult for me, or it was very uncomfortable. I didn't want to have an uncomfortable conversation with the board, so I just said, you know what, it's just better for us to scrap that project. So for me, that keeps me going.
Okay, so inspiration versus motivation, right? So what I'm hearing is that you have to have this inner resolve. Yeah,
Yes.
you have to have this inner resolve. But I feel like sometimes we get stuck on this thing, like I'm not motivated. I need some motivation. Yeah. What can you say about that?
I think motivation is, okay, no offense, but I think motivation is highly overrated. A lot of things we'll do in life are not motivated. I mean, I don't think one of the things is biologically we're not motivated for pain or uncomfortable situations. So we have to push yourself. If you are depending on motivation to propel you, you will never be motivated to speak in front of 1,000 people and be nervous. You will never be motivated to go in on a project that can fail. Your mind, your body will tell you, no, let's take the easy way out. So if you depend on motivation to propel you, I don't think it gets you, maybe it gets you starting. It can give you the motivation to start, but it will not keep you going because the motivation will wane. Eventually everything, even the most noble ideas, eventually become monotonous. For example, if you look at, if you think about the amount of time it takes to develop anything, any product, when you're starting off, it's very interesting, it's something new. But then those who succeed are those who stay the journey. Because after a while, the initial euphoria ends. With everything, you get a new role. In the beginning, you're very excited and new challenges. But then it soon becomes, every day a routine. Now you have to push through the routine. So I think you have to be inspired and you have to find something inside you that keeps you going. But if you motivation, I don't think can really do much because it is not enough to propel or sustain the growth.
Absolutely. Actually, you can become a motivational junkie. Like an addict. You're listening to motivational speech after speech, but you're not doing anything. But during the speech, you're fired up and like, I can take this on. And then afterwards, you're like, I don't have the energy, because there's nothing internally that's propelling you. Okay. So the other question is, how do you build a personal brand at your employers when you're now at your employers?
How do you build a personal brand? I think is track record. To build a brand, you have to be known for something. One, have integrity. You cannot get anywhere without integrity. And integrity means being able to say it as it is, even when it is at your own detriment. I know sometimes it's very difficult. It's counterintuitive. You want to say things that put you on a good light, but unfortunately, what that does, it sends a message that you cannot be trusted. But if you have integrity, one, that is like most important, because then people can trust you. So even when you fail, people are more willing to forgive you of your failures if you have integrity. But if you built a track record based on, falsehood, so people will always, you cannot honestly just wake up one morning and say, oh, you know what, this one was a bad mistake on my end. Like, no, you're not trustworthy. So integrity is really important. Another thing is also resilience. I think at the end of it all, every organization wants to make sure that the person they have will withstand the test of time. That when the going gets tough, you will not abandon your post, as it were. You will stick it out. So once you have those two things, and now that becomes what you're known for. Within the organization, even with your bosses, that they know if you want something done, talk to Beryl. She will be able to do it done. And if she can't do it, she'll be honest enough to tell you it can't be done. And that's what you want. So I'd say those two things: build a track record, have integrity, then you should be able to build a personal brand.
Absolutely. And I'd add as well, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Yeah. Show up. Yeah. Okay. And the last question. Oh, this is a good one. I work in an environment where the technical leaders are more respected than administration leaders. As a HR practitioner, how can I get a seat at the table?
Okay. I'd say in this, it's to show the value. So for example, if you're working in an organization that's very technical, I am sure there will be gaps, there will be things that from a HR point of view, the value you're able to bring. Unfortunately, in most organizations, the value is not on, it's on what you are able to bring. And when I say value, it has to be tangible. It has to be something that you can actually prove. So for example, let's say if in an organization that's an operation organization, if you're able to prove that an initiative is going to have an improvement in efficiency, a reduction in cost, have the numbers, be able to find that one thing within the organization that, how do you say, that earns you a seat on the table. Unfortunately, that seat is only given to, and mostly I understand that most technical organizations tend to be very skewed. So the technical department will have all the say. But I've worked in organizations that are technical where the HR really had a seat actually on the senior management role, and she had input. And the reason is this because two things. One, she had a track record in terms of recruiting. So the team, even the technical team, was able to appreciate that she was able to get really, really good engineers. Two, that she was able to get the most out of the engineers, that she was able to improve the welfare of the staff, and by so doing, improve on the output. So find that problem that you'll be able to solve for the organization, and then monitor and also measure it. If they say what can be measured can be improved. So start point is fast. For example, let's say you have working hours. So you're able to show that in the last 6 months, our average working hours are 8, or our average working hours are 6 because we have wastage because of people are spending so much time at the water cooler, people are spending so much time going out for lunch. So we have this proposal that would have, cut off the wastage by this much. Then now you have a foot into that particular space.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. So in closing, what do you feel, what's on your heart to share in closing?
My heart, I'd say, it's to be courageous. I know sometimes it feels daunting, some tasks are daunting, but trust in yourself. It sounds like a cliche, but you need to trust that you have the capability to do it, even though it may not be obvious at the beginning.
Awesome. Nothing to add. So Macharia, thank you so much for your time. Wow, it was a good chat. I feel like there's so much we could have discussed in great depth, but to another time. Thank you so very much. And thank you guys too for staying on. I think one has dropped off. Wow. So that's engaging for you too. Yeah, so why don't you guys unmute and just say thank you to Macharia as we close for the evening.
Thank you, Barry.
Okay, so you can unmute and say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Macharia.
Thank you very much, Macharia.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Macharia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
All right.
Thank you. That was so informative. Thank you.
Yeah, inspiring.
I'm glad could share that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. So guys, have a lovely evening, and I wish you all the very best until our next session. Yeah, karibuni sana then. All right, bye.
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 Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Beryl.
Bye, my friend.